Spain is one of the most famous stops on the FIM Motocross World Championship calendar. Belpuig, even Lugo last year shot to fame immediately. Talavera de la Reina, the list goes on. Cozar, the MXGP of Castilla-La Mancha, will not join that list anytime soon. In fact, the sooner it's forgotten, the better, according to most in the MXGP paddock. But we'll get into that and so much more on this episode of the MXGP podcast show, recapping round two, a muddy MXGP of Castilla-La Mancha, or Spain, as it is known more simply. I'm your host, Lewis Phillips, joined by On Track Off Road's Adam Wheeler. Hello.
Hey Lewis, did you make it back from 2015 okay?
Yes, actually. Still stuck in nostalgia a little bit. Um, And also, I just tried to do an intro off the cuff again. It didn't go as smoothly as
Oh, I
2015,
thought it
but
was all
never
right.
mind. Well, I feel like I
I thought it
got
was
to you
okay.
quite quickly. I feel like I missed something, but never mind.
No. I think that was good. I mean, it was, round two of the series and a complete contrast to what we saw in Argentina, in pretty much every way.
Well, yes, because MXGP tends to have one of these bogey races a year, and it's fair to say that Cozar was certainly it. Well, first of all, a bit of background. Cozar debuted on the calendar last year. It was dry. It was the epic finale. It benefited from Jorge Prado winning his second MXGP title on home turf. But despite that, there was quite a lot of negativity about the track and the infrastructure. To the credit of the organisers, they took some necessary steps to improve the track, improve the soil. So they were trending in a positive direction, but it absolutely rained horrifically all week leading up
It
to round
was
two. And the event has maybe gone down as the biggest disaster in recent memory.
it was all in vain, in the rain on the plane in Spain.
I know you're big on this at the moment. I just read your on track off road article where you're very big on
Uh,
this rhyming.
well, I live in Spain and in the north. I mean, Castilla-La Mancha is pretty much central south. And normally, you would bet on that kind of location for a first European Grand Prix to be pretty good. I mean, your chances of getting a dry, event that's not that cold would be pretty decent, especially compared to, say, sort of the northern countries like Belgium, Holland, France, UK. Having a Grand Prix sort of mid-March in Northern Europe would be incredibly risky. But yeah, unfortunately, the stormy kind of climate just like swept things out, and it was depressing seeing the teams being dragged into the paddock before the weekend on what was a very kind of exposed location. If you see any photos or footage of the circuit itself, but then things seem to be picking up on Saturday, but by Sunday, overnight rain and storms during the morning just like completely wrecked it. And it seemed there was maybe a couple of hundred people there who had just sort of braved the ankle deep mud. It was pretty depressing.
Yeah, it's credit, in fact, to In Front because based on the scenes from Friday, riders were texting me saying this is Pancao Penang 2017 again. I don't know how bikes are even going to go on the track. So the fact of it, it was semi-raceable, not Faenza '09, not Pancao Penang 2017. Bikes weren't getting stuck just in the race line, which is kind of the meter for epic mudder. The fact that it did turn out to be semi-raceable is impressive to a degree and deserves some applause before we absolutely tear this apart.
Yeah, and I mean, I was writing about this in sort of the Substack article, but I think people were surprised that Cozar was back on the calendar. Spain, as you mentioned, it does have quite a bit of MXGP or Grand Prix history, but it's not kind of the most stable event on the Grand Prix calendar. And the fact that it had three rounds in 2024 is highly unusual, probably based off the fact of Jorge Prado's profile. But the fact that Cozar was back on the schedule for 2025 was a little bit of a surprise. And based on just the attendance itself, it's hard to imagine if the club and everybody else made sufficient money to be able to come back for 2026, which that's the shame of it.
Yeah, a lot of complaints as well about the wash bays had no water, which I guess was kind of an issue last year, but because it was dry, it wasn't too much of an issue, but obviously magnified with the conditions. Parking was, one person told me they were a 20-minute walk from the circuit.
Yeah.
And the parking that was available was catastrophic by all accounts. As a whole, it sounds like this was as far from a world championship event as you could perhaps possibly get, which is saying something because, truth be told, MXGP has had some stinkers over the years.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the catch 22 because people say, why are you not going back to proper motocross circuits? And that's because you just can't get the infrastructure in these days. You know, everybody's got these Goldfish Bowl semis, and I mean, even European Championship teams, maybe EMX 250 or European Championships as a theme you want to get into, Lewis, or maybe it deserves a podcast by itself. But, you know, there's just motocross or MXGP itself, as we've said numerous times before, has just outgrown the kind of facilities where you have to roll into a grassy field because, you know, then round three is like a couple of days away. And if the whole show has to be out of a mud pit and it has to be cleaned and it has to be set up in another venue and another territory, then it's just not really doable. I mean, there's only so much you can do about the weather, so I have a lot of sympathy for that because you know how can you legislate for sort of torrential conditions? And it does tend to happen once every 2 to 3 years, but then it could happen at say Valkenswaard where everything's hard standing and it's a far more simpler affair to manage. But yeah, to say it didn't look like a world championship event is fair because it didn't, even down to some of the production elements that we saw through the TV. But you know, also I think you do have to have some understanding for, you know, the I don't know, coincidental nature of it, I guess.
We weren't there, of course, but just to give our opinions here some validity. Too many,
Validity.
okay, too many its in there for me. Um, I text pretty much everyone I know. And eventually the question was zeroed into, please give me something positive about Cozar, anything. And no one could give me even a word. In the end, the final question I sent to someone was, I'm guessing MXGP should never, ever, ever, ever go back to Cozar. And the reply was 1,000,000%. So I couldn't find a single shred of positivity. Our colleague, who you make me look like a rookie, but he makes you look like a rookie, Pascal had a quirk. Had a quirk?
Oh, they care.
Oh, I butchered it. He posted on Moto Verte, which is a French website's Facebook page on Sunday morning.
Mooning.
You've
Oh,
thrown me
hello,
off.
hello.
You've thrown me off. What's the mood this morning in Cozar? The rain has stopped falling while the temperature is 5 degrees, and we can't expect much good. Car parks are so muddy we have to park forever away. Paddock lanes are liquid mud. No water in the wash bays. In short, this is by far one of the worst GPs in 30 years.
Wow.
So there's that. That was posted on a French media site. A media colleague of ours posted this on his personal Facebook page. So I won't name him because this is personal, but just to give you an idea, get me out of this shithole now. Parked the car 1.3 kilometers away. Paddock and car parks flooded. Haven't seen no food or drink in the media center all weekend. Where's the toilets? Full of mud all over the seats. Clearly not a GP track. It's actually disgusting and an embarrassment for world motocross. Let's not start with the track and the safety of the riders on the start, crossing foot-deep ruts and the cost for teams. This is only round two. So
Yeah, but the track is something else. Yeah, it could be shit still. But then the facility, you have to agree that if it's not able to cope with that sort of weather, then, you know, all that criticism is justified. But can I just like play devil's advocate
yeah, of course.
and point out the positive for a moment? Lorenzo Resta, our friend and colleague, had a very nice image of a beautiful arcing rainbow by the end of the day. So there was that moment of beauty.
Okay.
Am I
Should we
being
have started
flippant?
the
Sorry.
podcast with that,
Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah. No, Lewis, I mean, you know, that's frontline feedback. And, you know, coming from people that have traveled all the way to Argentina and come back and gone down to southern Spain and then going to Western France in a couple of days, which, you know, is also pretty notorious for being 50-50 with the weather.
Well, let's get to that now quickly. Weather forecast for St. John at the time of recording, which is Tuesday morning, so it can change, is rain Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Ouch.
But to
Right.
your earlier point, St. John, an old school circuit, perhaps the most old school we have, the paddock is hard standing. I don't know, I wasn't there 20 or so years ago, but I'm guessing those are measures that have been taken to bring it to current spec.
Yeah, well, the thing with St. John as well is being on the side of a hill, you obviously have the start at the bottom, which could get, it's probably the worst, but then, the organizers tend to grade that part of the track and the first turn quite well, obviously. But then a couple of those big downhill corners as well get incredibly rutty. I mean, it's Scalextric's cross. So depending on the rain, I mean, the slopes and everything else, the track is this weird kind of hybrid between manageable and, really, really technical and sketchy. And it's quite stony as well at St. John, or it used to be. But yeah, it should be a lot easier in terms of infrastructure and basic things like, parking and exiting and whatever else.
Castilla-La Mancha was already on its last legs with a sophomore term. I think a lot of people were surprised to see it come back, even if it was going to be a dry venue.
Yeah.
From what I've heard in the paddock, and I got this from three or four people, there were murmurings that in front have now cancelled the contract going forward based
Oh,
on
wow.
the
That was quick.
shit show of the weekend and that it will not return. But to be clear, there's no way this can return. I think if this appears on the 2026 calendar, the eye roll collectively from the industry will be difficult for in front to manage. Fair?
Yeah, yes, and also it's pretty remote from what I hear. I mean, hotel access is not that close. I mean, you may think, well, what does that matter? But then if you are trying to attract a 10, 20, 30,000 crowd, it's something you have to consider. If people have to drive 40, 45 minutes, 1 hour away to get to a hotel, then it's just part of the logistics that create a ball ache around the event. But it depends, Lewis, because if that Grand Prix comes in with like a June, July, August, September date next year, then you'd have to imagine geographically where it is. Then that's a no-brainer. It's going to be a half decent event. But if the facility's not up to grade, then yeah, sack it off.
And yeah, it is a shame because they did put in a significant amount of investment to improve the track. Whether it would have made any difference, we don't know. No one had any dry running. But to close the Castilla-La Mancha portion of this podcast, you know it's a stinker when I had multiple people text me, "When is your podcast coming out? We can't wait to hear it."
Right. Okay.
So that I
Yes,
think that
slam
tells
it.
you.
Throw mud at the mud.
And to be clear, I mean those texts coming from people who were there. This is kind
Yeah.
of the soundboard for the paddock, you could say, paddock radio. I think it's
Okay,
been
I have a
referred to.
question. I have a question related to Castilla-La Mancha. Not so much the grade of the installation itself, because obviously people that are there have put sort of the knife in, deservedly so perhaps. But what about this type of motocross? I mean, I kind of wrote in the column, does this kind of race benefit anybody at all? Because aside from the riders that maybe climb on the podium, pocket a bonus, get world championship points or whatever, I can't imagine it's fun for any other fun. I mean, it's a sport, but it's, what are the advantage of running that event for anybody? The mechanics, the teams, in-front motor racing itself, the riders that are probably dealing with injury, everything gets trashed. Uh, there's nobody there. I don't think if you called it off at the 11th hour, then, there would have been a stampede of Spanish fans demanding, some action. Uh, I don't know. Where's the limit on something like this?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I don't know. Similar, whereas maybe Monster Energy AMA Supercross has contracts with NBC Sports, Peacock, and all of this sort of stuff going on, which would, I would presume, make it difficult to cancel an event. As far as I can tell from a very elementary position, in front is in its own bubble and can kind of do whatever it wants within reason, right? I mean, the FIM is obviously involved, but there's not X contract that they have to consider because they've signed this and they have to put on an event. So I get where you're coming from. Have they ever cancelled a GP? Certainly not in my lifetime. Well, obviously they've
No,
cancelled GPs weeks in advance, but when everyone's there, no.
yeah, I mean, the only time drastic action has happened is, after one moto, where, conditions have been deemed too dangerous or simply impossible, such as Pancalpinan, as you said, in 2017?
Yeah.
Another Grand Prix where we've only seen one moto, like Belpuig in 2008, Faenza in 2009. Trying to think of any other ones, but
It's not
the
happened for a
Grand
while.
Prix. Yeah, the Grand Prix have always started. I mean, maybe that is a contractual thing as well. You know, the race has to start, the fans have to come through the gate. Maybe for, and I'm sure each Grand Prix contract within front motor racing has different kind of tiers. You know, there probably will be some events that pay everything up front. There'll be others that pay in installments, you know, so it depends. The event has to happen for people to get paid, I suppose.
And I'm not sure entirely if this is true, but I remember hearing that in front has a commitment to the FIM to hold an X number of events. So perhaps if they threw in the towel at an event they're at, they would then have to replace it, which is double the cost essentially. Um, I don't know. It wasn't
Yeah.
good. It wasn't good. But to be honest, like the positive here, and this would probably be what in front or the promoters defend the event with. Riders were doing jumps. It was raceable. It wasn't one of those epic
Yeah.
mudders. So if it's raceable and everyone could finish and it's great and people are jumping, then what's the problem?
But
That
do you like
would be
that?
a defense.
Do you like that kind of motocross? Because I think the entertainment, I mean, instead of Argentina, where you're left looking at the footage thinking, how the fuck are these guys going that fast and doing that so well? Which kind of tends to be par for the course for the nationals. But we don't see that so much with MXGP tracks. You know, this time it was more about, okay, is he going to make it round the lap? Is he going to make it through the corner? Is he going to make a mistake because so and so is closing up and catching up? That seemed to be like the slow burn entertainment factor. And I'm still trying to work out whether it's any good or not.
I do always get excited for a mud race of this magnitude because the prospect of it being different from the norm is exciting to me. What's going to happen? This is a chance for anyone to win. That grips me. That engages me.
Okay.
Now, ultimately, we had Tim Gajser go 1-1, which would have been predictable in any weather condition. So without that element, yes, it then lost some attraction. But if I was watching the broadcast and name 15th place rider was running away, Zanchi in Moto 1, for instance, him winning Moto 1 was
Yeah.
fascinating enough to me to make me go, wow, this is interesting. How about that?
Yeah,
So
it's
that's
weirdo
the
results, isn't it?
plus.
Rain always kind of creates these bizarre situations where you get riders that normally perhaps wouldn't be fighting for a moto win.
But again, less so maybe. I feel like okay, so Pankau Penang in 2017, Sean Simpson won, which was different from the norm. People, I was arguing, not arguing, I was talking to people on Twitter about this. Some people claim that Jonas last year in Agada was a shock of this degree, and I don't. Yes, it was slightly different from the norm, but it wasn't out of this world mind blowing. I feel like we're even at a point now where the best riders win no matter what, or one of the
Uh,
best riders.
yeah, but I mean, there are cliche elements, isn't it? I mean, it is a lottery. It does depend on the start. It does depend on your goggles not being filled up, and you have to pull into the goggle lane for a replacement and losing time. There just seems to be the margin for error. There seems to be much smaller in these kind of conditions. And like I said to you, I don't know if that means better racing or not, because as a contest, it's largely redundant. I mean, there's nothing happening on track. There's no kind of parity. It's just down to who can stay on two wheels more. And that has its own kind of dramatic element, but it really is something you have to invest in. And I don't think, you know, it's really going to win new fans if that's the purpose of MXGP.
No, I think that's certainly fair. And to your point about there not being much there, uh, that's a good segue into the rest of this podcast, where we won't be talking about the results so much because, truthfully, there isn't much to unpack because the results were earned through survival. But there are some key points that we will get to, starting with Tim Geiser's dominant performance. In fact, surprised me the first time that he has taken the 60 at a Grand Prix since the qualifying
Oh,
points were
okay.
introduced. Wouldn't think so, would you?
By that, of course, that just to explain, you mean qualifying race win and both moto
Yeah.
wins. That's the first time he's done the
Well,
triple.
no, obviously he did it pre-qualifying points for first time since there were points
Right.
on offer for
Okay.
qualifying.
We're still
Um,
2 years in. No, 3 years in.
2 years and 2 rounds now.
Yeah.
So that was surprising. Also, his 50th Grand Prix win. So I did some research. This surprised me as well. Hurling's got to 50 GP wins in 85 starts, which is ridiculous and not the bar for any rider ever. So well done, Jeffrey, but let's not compare others by that ridiculous scale. Caroli got there in 130 starts,
Okay.
probably about what you'd expect, right? Maybe a little longer.
Yeah.
I think a little
Uh,
longer than I
well,
expected.
first of all, some context that puts Gajser as the fifth most successful rider in the history of World Championship racing, level with Joel Robert. I can remember how much of a big deal it was for Joel Smets to equal that record. I mean, Joel Robert, of course, was the reference for sort of Belgian motocross to a degree, maybe even more than Roger da Costa for some. And it was a big deal. So Gajser now is equal fifth with him, and he has in head ahead of him Smets, who's on seven
57.
more races. Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously Cairoli and Hurlings, and then Stefan Everts. I mean, whether Gajser is going to get up to Everts's previously, unshatterable record, is a big doubt. But yeah, and I think he's like fourth or something on the list for 500 slash MXGP category wins. He's got a few more than Cairoli, I want to say. But yeah, I mean, it's still something that's pretty phenomenal, Lewis. And sorry if I interrupted your sequence of stats about how quickly he arrived to that point.
Well, the final point, because I don't have this information for Smets or Joel Robert or Stefan, because no one knows where the results are from 2002 previous. They're just gone, which is sad. But Geyser did it in 203 starts, which really surprised me because I would have
Yeah.
thought that he got there. If anything, it's surprising that we're only now talking about Geyser hitting 50 because it feels like he's won a hell of a lot. I mean, I guess he only won four MX2 GPs, I guess. So that adds a total to his
Yeah, but are
start
you
tally.
are you really that surprised? Because he's never been like a serial winner. He's been more of a championship guy, hasn't he?
I guess so, but no, but like those seasons, 22, 2020, 2019, I feel like he was racking up 10, 11, 12 a year, which would get you there. I'm now just pulling
No,
it
I
up
wouldn't. I
because,
I don't think it's never really been that much.
okay, since he joined the 450 class, his win total each year, seven in 2016, three in 2017, zero 2018, 2019, nine, 2020, five, 2021 4, 2022 10. So the only example. Last year, no, sorry, 2023 2, last year 4, this year 1. So I guess, yeah, that does equal 50 as it should. Well, it doesn't
So
because that's not
the
including MX2, but
Yeah. But then what's the trend there that he has most wins in seasons when arguably the championship favorite has been injured?
well, 2022 is definitely the standout there at 10. Second highest is his rookie 450 term with 7, and Caroli was there.
Yeah, but in
Uh,
2022, Cairoli retired. Febra broken his
yeah,
leg and
20
wasn't
no,
there, and then Hurlings was
2022.
out.
Yeah, 2022 was everyone was out.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. But 2016, you can't claim that, I don't think.
No, no.
Also, further Geyser stat 3,619 days after his first Grand Prix win, which was April the 19th, 2015.
As
So,
we talked about the other day.
yes, it actually tied in perfectly. And that does it for my stats on Geyser. So, thanks
He
for
rode
coming
well,
out.
eh?
Oh, no, I've got more.
Oh, go on
Oh, you
then.
don't want them more?
No, 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 no. I'm just saying, and also don't forget that it was very fitting that he kind of went 1-1 and won in Cozar after losing the title there 6 months previously.
Yeah, that's true. I was actually surprised. Honda HRC, as it is now known, still not gotten to the bottom of that. Um, I was quite surprised. They do like a preview press release, and Marcus, the general manager, and Tim both referenced the fact of going back to a heartbreaking venue. I was surprised so much emphasis was placed on. I don't. Yeah, I was just surprised that this was referenced so much.
Closing the door or closure.
Well, I would have presumed the door had been closed previously, and this was reopening the door for a split second, but
Well, it's kind
referencing
of
it, that
been
is.
yeah, it's been slam shut now.
Okay. Um, yes, but this is interesting and quite odd, I think. Now, Geyser is one GP win behind Jeffrey in 450 win total, but also at the same time, he's now one moto win behind Jeffrey in the 450 moto win total. How weird to be in that position in both categories at the same time.
Yeah, and well, Geiger has one more season of 450 riding than Hurlings,
Yes.
even though and
I
he's two
mean,
years younger, right?
and if you want to really play that sort of game, Hurlings didn't race at all in 2022, so technically 2 seasons, and Hurlings only raced 5 GPs in 2019. And if you if we could continue this game with basically Hurlings hasn't raced, and this is his rookie year, is where we're at. Um, yeah, just I don't know. And this brings us on to our next question for you, Adam. Who ends the year with more 450 GP wins, Jeffrey or Tim? Because there's an interesting dynamic coming up. Jeffrey should be back at round 4, Sardinia. He's back on a bike now. By all accounts, it's going well. Um, Potentially, you could argue that Jeffrey's going to come in behind the 8 ball, and therefore Tim will continue to win, surpass Jeffrey this year, and Tim will win all. Or you could argue Jeffrey will get up to speed, Tim will have a championship to think about, and therefore that will just leave the door open for Jeffrey to go on a bit of a tear with wins in the second half.
Yeah, I'd lean more towards that eventuality. But I still think Gajser's going to win Grand Prix, and it
Of
might
course.
take. But the thing is, if Hurlings returns in Sardinia, Riola Sardo, then it's right into the sand. And I wouldn't be surprised if Hurlings is in. We know he's going to be in good shape physically. If he feels pretty good with the bike, doesn't need to test or change that much, then I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in the podium in that kind of terrain. It could be just one of those freak results that you wouldn't think was possible, but he manages to do it. As for the rest, I still think he'll be a little rusty and he needs to come up to speed, and that's where Gajser will be making hay. He's got the red plate, but we're doing a disservice. I still think Lewis to sort of Maxime Renaux. You know, Even more impressive about Geiger's win in Cozar was the fact that anybody could have won that GP. But Geiger was the one who had the maturity and sort of just the measurement, the experience to pull through those kind of conditions. I think it said a lot towards the way he can administer a race, but also the real sort of strength and physicality he has to avoid big mistakes and keep everything sort of the right way up.
Yeah, if anything, I think the fact that Geyser was so dominant in Cozar and not joined by either Fevre or Renaux on the podium best illustrates why I, and to a degree you, backed Geyser so heavily for this title. Because as I said after
Yeah.
Argentina, he will be there every week. And you cannot tell me with confidence that Renaux or Fevre will be there every week. You just can't. And here we are, two
Yep.
rounds in. Geyser has a clean podium record. And yeah, the other two don't. And Geyser's championship lead, by the way, is 20 points,
Oh,
which is
but I mean,
quite a
the thing
figure.
is, well, yes and no. But I mean, it sounds absurd. But in a championship where you can score nearly 1,000 points in one season, we've seen titles come, to split by 10 or 20. And, if Geiger has taken that 20-point advantage by round two over sort of like, Maxime Renault or Febra, then it really does count.
Yeah, it's true. Can I do two more stats, or are you done with me?
No, go for it.
You're not sick of me? Okay.
No, I just this newfound love for Tim is,
Well,
I'm all in.
we're going to get to this at the end of the podcast because I don't want to waste time because we've already done a pretty good job of that. After me telling you that we're not going to talk much today and I don't have much to say, we're 30 minutes in and we've not even finished talking about Rider 1. But
Two more stats.
this is very interesting, I think, because as I said, Geyser is one behind Jeffrey in overall 450 wins. However, in overall 450 podiums, Geyser has 106 and Jeffrey only has 72, which
There you
points
go.
to the difference in Geyser's consistency versus Hurling's win or not record.
Yeah, he's a championship man.
Yeah.
And I think, Jeffrey will always be remembered as the fastest motocrosser on the planet at times. Certainly in the World
The
Championship,
apple of my eye.
but not as, this kind of force of or just having the general package. I mean, maybe that's fair or unfair. I don't know.
Another stat, one more, and then we're moving on. First moto of MXGP. Geyser was first, Ruben Fernandez was second. Team HRC have a bit of a difficult history with second riders. You could argue it's similar to Red Bull in F1 if you want to go down that route. Maybe a story there. When was the last time Team HRC or Honda HRC, as it's now known, had a 1-2 in a moto? You have to go all the way back to the Grand Prix of Mexico in 2017 when Tim Gajser won and Evgeny Bobashev was second. Of course, Honda have had more recent podium, 1-2, sorry. Gajser and Jonas were 1-2 in the second moto or first moto, maybe in Portugal last year. But for the actual HRC team, I don't know what's wrong with me today. 2017. So
Good
some sort of
stat.
achievement there. Thank you. And I'm done for the time
Well,
being.
can we use that as a tangent to mention Ferruccio Zanci's podium appearance in MX2 because that gave Honda HRC and their new factory MX2 project a pretty good sort of start to the year, right?
Well, yes, but we need to put a stick in that for now because I have a lot more stats for that. And if I
I
do that now, then I'm
apologize.
gonna.
Yep.
We need
I'll
to.
run off track and park in the mud for the moment.
Yes, because otherwise I'm just gonna have to keep reeling off numbers. But we can talk about Ruben Fernandez, HRC's second rider, because hilariously he raced for first moto with his scoop tire installed backwards.
Okay.
Or
Um,
inside out, I guess would be the correct way of explaining it.
yeah, yeah, or upside down.
I, yeah, one of those. I think that paints the picture. Supposedly, no one realized until his bike touched the grate, and he asked if he could change it, and they said no because the bike had touched the grate. And once the bike touches the grate, mechanics aren't allowed to interfere. Never
Oh,
known.
I didn't know that
Or
rule.
yeah, I think that's a rule. Is it
Well, as
not?
soon as it touches the gate,
No, the
I haven't heard
grate.
that rule. Yeah.
Yeah, because the
Oh, right.
mechanics,
Yeah.
the
The mesh.
mechanics
Yeah.
can't be there, can they, with them when they're on the grate and stuff?
Yeah, but sometimes they help them lift the
Yeah,
bike onto the,
and
yeah.
like push it onto the grate, and like they never actually touch the bike on the grate. I think that
Okay.
I'm pretty sure this is a rule. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Hmm.
paddock people. But yeah, he finished second in the moto, so who knew it works?
Yeah.
Cue
And also Honda, getting the starts when they needed to.
that as well. But you can now cue all of the more fragile riders who are searching for advantages and the correct setup to now start installing tires inside out because they'll believe there's some sort of magic in that. Um, but yeah, that was a nice little story. I enjoyed that. Fantic, fantastic Fantic. No, they didn't land on the moon, but boy, did they shoot for it.
Oh, wow.
No, sorry, it would have been better for me to say, no, they didn't land on the moon, but boy, did they shoot for the stars. Um, a double
Welcome
podium.
to Radio Derby. Are you
Um,
going to
a-
lead into a song by the Lighthouse Family or something
I
now,
like
or
the
what?
Lighthouse family. Did you know the Lighthouse family is the theme of my childhood?
Really?
Yep. But we're trying not to waste time. So,
Okay.
Fantic, double podium, the manufacturer's first podium in MXGP, and a double at that. Glenn Coldenough returns to the podium after a year away from trophies. And yeah, congrats to all involved. Louis Vosters was left in a difficult position when Yamaha dropped him. Fantic was a lifeline, and it's turning out to be quite beneficial, successful for all involved, which is great.
This is where we are going to let down listeners or viewers of this podcast, Lewis, because Coldenhoff in the press conference, great ride. That was his first podium finish in 2 years. Said that the team have been working, or Fantic have been pushing really hard to try and improve the technical package that we know is at one point was a rebadged, YZ450F. And we don't actually know kind of the extent of that hard work, whether Fantic have actually made many changes or Coldenhoff is just talking about a setting development, with the various components they have on the package. That's something we don't know. We need to maybe investigate a little bit more, such as, Maxime Renault's famous 4-year-old frame. It's, something I think we kind of need to get into the paddock and investigate a bit more. But Coldenhoff did finish his sort of speech in the press conference by saying it's going to be a very good year for Fantic, as if to intimate that this is not going to be a one-off, and the conditions and the mud and the slime were not the reason that he was joined on the podium by Andrea Bonaccorsi. And Brian Bogers as well, just popped up out of nowhere to sort of finish, I think, third in the second moto. I mean, that was a 1-2-3 for Fantic in that race,
Or two,
up
three,
behind
four.
Gajser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, no, I agree with everything you said. I would be curious to know if the Fantic has maybe strayed from its Yamaha makeup somewhat, or maybe because Fantic do have more freedom than say factory Yamaha, if Fantic have been able to go in a direction that factory Yamaha maybe can't. That would be my
Yeah.
question to Glenn, which I will try to get to the bottom of now that you've mentioned it. Bogers, you mentioned him. I feel like he deserves some credit just for. I feel like his career, if anything, is looked down upon. But actually, even going back to his MX2 days, he's had a nice career, and I feel like we won't appreciate Bogers until it's all said and done. GP winner,
Yeah,
multi-time podium finisher.
just real blatant inconsistency. I mean, Brian always pops up with a couple of good race results in a season, but it's rarely kind of put together. I mean, in terms of fitness and performance levels, I mean, Paul's Jonas is a similar kind of figure, but Paul's has just had that, that injury curse. Whereas Brian, just has that tendency to, hit it or make the home run one weekend and then just be struggling the next.
Well, and also, don't forget, Bogers is celebrated as maybe the best test rider in the paddock. Everyone who's worked with him really applauds his ability in that category. So I think once he does retire, he'll have a he'll have a job in the
Another
sport for
job.
life, and maybe gets a lot of credit for the Fantic transformation. In fact, we need to give credit as well to Kevin Strybos because he trains the Fantic team. He's also a test rider of sorts. So congrats to Kevin for the double podium and the work that he's done with the Fantic team. I think that he'll appreciate this.
Okay.
So well done, Kevin. We're proud of you. Um, a cold enough stat. No. A cold enough stat. He is the only rider that I can find going back to 2004. Again, we don't have results pre that, so no one knows. But going back to 2004, podium or 450 podiums with five different manufacturers.
Suzuki, Yamaha,
KTM.
now Fantic and KTM. Yeah, of course. Wow, Lewis, that was a good one.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Can you do them chronologically?
yeah, chronologically is easy, isn't it? Suzuki, KTM, Yamaha, Fantic.
There we go.
Um, the only people I could find close to that was Paulan, Dodika, and Leok with four manufacturers.
Paul would have been Kawasaki, Honda, Husqvarna, and
This,
Yamaha.
yeah, I randomly for Yamaha for me was a bit of a disconnect as well. Um, Spoiler alert, that's not the only time there will be a Dodika mention on this podcast. I don't know why I've got so many stats. It's just now dawning on me that I have a lot, but I do have another one. And I will stop. I don't know how this is. I've got a page here with 5 bullet points, but somehow there's a lot here.
You can tell you've had a weekend off from like AMA Supercross. I mean, did you get anything done?
Bonacorsi, and I thought this was interesting as well. Bonacorsi, the first new podium finisher in MXGP since Guadagnini in 2022. Quite some time since we've had a fresh face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've always got to applaud. You've always got to enjoy those people who get up there for the first time because, when you have, I don't want to say jaded, but you have people like even Koldenhoff to a degree who know that feeling all too well. Seeing that sort of explosion of euphoria, a personal best result is always cool.
Okay, done with stats for the time being now, I swear. Fevre was quite happy with his race, even though he lost significant points and was fifth overall. He seemed quite upbeat. I think he was well aware, leaning on that experience you just mentioned, well aware that so much could have gone wrong in the mud, and it ultimately didn't to a disastrous degree. So that was reason to celebrate, I guess. Isaac Gifting, who actually is a
Yeah.
Polosport rider. So let me just tell you about this quickly because he's also a Yamaha rider. And if you've got a Yamaha YZ125 or 250 collecting dust in your garage, what is going on today? Maybe it's time to give that beast a fresh new look. Scratch that, a totally new look. Polosport just dropped the YZ125 250 restyling kit, and here's the kicker. It fits every model from 2002 and all of the way to 2021. This isn't just a plastics kit, you're getting the full package, a brand new gas tank, a complete seat, an airbox, and of course, a full set of fresh plastics to make your ride look factory new. As for the price, well, you might want to check that out for yourself. Let's just say, for what you're getting, it's a game changer. And yeah, so head to Polosport for more on that. Isaac Gifting, incredibly fast, incredible risk taker, brilliant, really. I don't know if this really does much for him long term, other than just remind everyone of the raw skill that he possesses.
Yeah, somebody else who's been, just blighted with injury problems, but, got a lot of time for Gifting because he's just like a hard charger. And this was one of those situations where the invitation was there and he went for it more than, most other riders. And it was cool to see his name, and using that word again, it was encouraging to see his name sort of floating up around the top five because he's capable of it. I think he has that speed. He's still young enough as well, what, mid-20s? I want to see more of this from him.
Yeah, and it is funny, like, you've got to keep some perspective that Koldenhoff, Federer, they won't be around forever, nor will Gajser. Gajser will be around longer than Koldenhoff and Federer. But remove Koldenhoff and Federer, and then suddenly it's Gajser, Bonacorsi, Fernandez, and Gifting fourth overall. And then
Yeah.
suddenly you're talking podium potential. I think it's important to maintain that perspective on how the makeup of the MXGP class will look in 2 to 3 years. Because although right now it would be easy to say that Gifting doesn't have it, the dimensions of what it is will be altered based on the competitive landscape.
Yeah, and timing is everything. He just has to, like I say, keep going, keep making sort of top seven, six, eight results, and keep healthy in a way. I mean, look at Calvin Verlander, and I think he's an example of a rider that seized the moment when he could and was rewarded with a factory contract. And it's doable, it's possible.
I also want to give credit to Gifting's very good friend and my new favorite rider, also our rider. We have adopted him because he's not only a Polosport rider, but also a Prox Pro X rider. So he is now
Okay.
ours. Kevin Horgmo continues to shine so bright. Like,
Yep.
our love for him. And fifth place in Moto 1 was superb. Just, I don't even know what to say other than I am so, so, so impressed with Kevin Horgmo. It's a bloody good job.
Where could he go? He could be a factory rider next year, right? I mean, I don't think he's got a
Well,
2-year deal, it's a 1-year deal.
yeah, but I did this on a podcast yesterday. If you look at it, Jeffrey's contract is up, but there's no way KTM are replacing Jeffrey with Horgmo.
Yeah.
I believe Geyser and Fernandez are both under contract.
No,
Uh,
Geiger's up as well, I think, yeah.
but Geyser, okay, well,
Um,
Geyser will go back though. That's a
yeah, there's nowhere else for him to go. So if he doesn't re-sign for HRC, then something's gone
yeah.
badly wrong there.
Federer and Jonas are both under contract. Triumph, I believe, will only run one 450, which will be Harrop. Ducati, Sewer is under contract, and I'm unsure about Guadagnini, but I would presume that he hasn't gone to an all-new manufacturer on a 1-year deal, because that would be quite odd for both sides.
Yeah.
Yamaha, Yamaha potentially. Okay, I guess that's the most open one because Gertz is somewhere in the world at the moment, deep dark
Yeah.
place most likely, and Vlanderen is up, I believe. So,
And
um,
Fantic.
yeah, Fantic, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
I
I forgot
mean,
about Fantic and
Horgmo
Peter.
is Horgmo. I can't offer any kind of insight here, but I would assume he's in a pretty good place in terms of the setup and the arrangement he has at the moment. Otherwise, he wouldn't be performing or showing the potential that he has. But I think he has a decent chance of making an upgrade in terms of the resources or whatever else he has to hand for 2026.
Certainly someone to bet on in the future, I would argue. Um,
Why would Triumph only have one bike? And this is why I was listening to you in a podcast the other day insisting that
oh,
Ducati would only have one rider in Supercross in 2026,
yeah, I think
and
so.
that being acceptable.
No,
I mean,
I
surely
don't think that Ducati will be in Supercross in 2026 at all. I
yeah,
think
but
that they will skip
I
Supercross.
think yeah, I just think having two riders is essential because of the attrition.
It is true. It is true. But then if you're entering the sport and you're I think, for instance, in America next year, the talk I've heard is that Triumph will have one 450 rider here as well. So I guess
Okay.
if you're entering a new arena, then that's dabbling your feet a little bit. Maybe resources are tight, new bike, spare
Yeah,
parts,
yeah.
etc., etc. I don't know, but certainly your point would make sense. Lucas Kuhnen very fast but crashy, not much to say there. Maxime Renault. So
I feel like you have something to say
yes,
about Maxime Renaux.
I've tried my hardest to be top journalist man, but have failed, unfortunately. Something happened to Renault after Argentina. He's got a slight injury. I
There
don't know
was
what it
rumors of
is.
this.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I've at least gotten to the point where I'm certain that something did happen.
But is this like a Coonan kind of rumor where we know he crashed and did have an injury, but nobody's talking about it?
Well, credit to Lisa Leyland because she did put Coonan on the spot pre-qualifying race, I want to say, and maybe got the most information that we've had. So there's
Yeah.
that. I mean, it still wasn't. quite clarification. But and obviously Renault was 10th overall. I believe he crashed on first lap of both motos, certainly one of them.
Yeah.
So for him to come through the field, score that well, etc., etc., whatever the issue is or was, had to have been something minor like a rib, or it can't be a broken leg. So perhaps a non-story. And from the people I've spoken to and a statement I saw from Renault, he alluded to the fact that he's going to St. Jean, his home Grand Prix, and will be 100%. So I don't know, but I'm at least certain now that there was something.
Maybe it's like a Cooper Webb style injury where something has happened, but he's clearly able to race.
Yeah,
But my
true.
question to you is, does this kind of I think he was one of the unfortunate ones in Cozar where, he just didn't really master the conditions, whether that was for a physical reason or just because of fate that day. But does this kind of scrub any of his championship likelihoodness
I want to
for
say
you?
no because I expected him to win one weekend and then be off the podium on occasion. But perhaps it reinforces the doubts. You could say that, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it proves, if anything, I mean, let's not forget he's raced relatively little over the last year, but it does show that he cannot afford to be having too many weekends like this because you will just open the door. Gajser will happily take a 1-2, a 2-3, or whatever else, whatever results are kind of there for him to maximize on the day. But if his rivals and people like Maxim are suddenly going 210 or 211 or something like that, then he can't afford to be that much off it.
Yeah, no, it's true. It'll be very telling what Renault come and Fevra. It'll be very telling what they both do in St. Jean. If it's
Yeah.
dry and if it's a raceable track, if they rebound, put it to Geyser and kind of establish the pecking order as Argentina's the norm, Cozar was an anomaly, then that I think that opens an interesting conversation. If Geyser goes out and wins again, Argentina becomes the anomaly, and the hopes of Fevre or Renault mounting a serious challenge start to fade somewhat.
Yeah, that's good. It's still very early. I mean, if
Yeah,
France was round 8 or 9 compared to round 3, then I would be more on board with you. But just a tangent again. Did you see the video with Maxime Renault doing the bike swap of Fabio Quartararo, the 2021 MotoGP world champion?
I saw the video. Did I click on it? No.
How did you see it without clicking on it?
Well, it was suggested on my YouTube, so I saw that it exists.
Okay,
I
watch
didn't.
it. It's really good. It's really well done. I mean, I made a tweet about this the other day. It's nothing new. I mean, Clement Desau did it with Jonathan Ray, multiple world superbike champion and sort of, the goat of that discipline. And it was pretty cool because, Desal is a bit of a road bike enthusiast as well. And he, acquitted himself pretty good on slick tires. But I thought this video just showed how switched on Renault is, and how he's able to relate the demands of motocross, and Quartararo is a big MXGP Supercross fanboy as well, and it's really well done and really well explained, and sort of the candid camera work sort of really sort of immerses you in it. There's no, it's not kind of that polished where you think, okay, this is all a bit staged. I like the sort of the natural feel of it, so I recommend it.
Okay, well, yeah, I presumed it would be very staged. So,
No, 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 it's not. It's quite good. It's
okay.
quite immersive.
Okay, I will actually consider that now then. Moving on, but just a couple of quick notes from MXGP. Jonas was unhappy, said he rode like an amateur. Vlandrin was sick coming into the weekend,
Ducati.
very sick, and had a clutch issue in the second moto. Watson had no front mudguard in either moto because the mud was so heavy that it caused it to snap. And yeah, the
I hope he
Ducati,
didn't
as you
have
said,
polysport plastics then. Of
probably should
course
have.
not.
No, of course he does. No, he doesn't. He doesn't. I would know about that because that would certainly be my read.
Right. Okay. And Ducati, I mean that must be some of the toughest physical conditions for the Desmo 450 MX yet.
Yes, I'm not certain what Guadagnini's issue was in Moto 1. I haven't really spoken to Jeremy in depth about the race, other than that it was a shit show. Um, a lot
Marco
of people
Maddi, I
are.
think, spoke to
Sorry.
Lisa saying it was demanding for the bike, and the development cycle in MXGP.
I just I feel like a lot of people are really coming down on Jeremy after 2 rounds, and I don't really
Oh,
know if
really?
it's warranted. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of like tweets and messages like he's going to need a new ride soon if he continues like this. But from memory, he
Bigger
was
picture.
fifth, I think, in the first moto in Argentina. Second moto in Argentina, he rode brilliantly but crashed multiple times. Um, he's a little man, so I don't think the mud necessarily helps him.
Yeah, he's not a big man for Otto.
No.
Give him a break. And also, it's, I think you have to expect that the bike is going to have teething troubles when it's pushed to the absolute limit in sand or in these kind of muddy conditions or whatever. Give him a break. If it was the end of the year and you're pointing fingers, then fair enough. But round two,
Yeah, I think I don't know why, because I've never seen Jeremy come under fire from the public, but it seems like the tide has changed somewhat.
that's
Um,
bollocks.
Before we move on to MX2, let me tell you about Prox or Pro X if you're American. Our best friend, Kevin Horgmo, our rider, Kevin Horgmo. How did he whole shot against factory machines with a fairly privateer effort? Well, he relies on Prox or Pro X, depending on where you're from. What he would have done is he would have gone to pro-x.com, used the very handy product finder where he selected the year, make, and model of his machine. He would have then taken advantage of all the Prox or Pro X has to offer, and therefore he's got a machine capable enough of challenging at the pointy end of the FIM Motocross World Championship. That is how Prox can change your life, and that is what Prox can do for your personal performance. So I highly recommend you head to pro-x.com, see all that they have to offer, and remember, if your clutch is slipping, those shiny new goggles aren't going to help you, which is important. So, MX2. And once again, we're up against it, and MX2 will likely not get the thank you for liking my tweet, will not get the attention it deserves. But 181 days later, or 181 days on from him lying in the Chinese Grand Prix track with a lack of feeling and a broken C5, Liam Everts is not only a Grand Prix winner, but just 6 points away from the red plate. And that, in my humble opinion, is incredibly impressive, awe-inspiring, deserving of applause, attention, credit, whatever you want to label it. That's it.
Is he the fifth rider under Rasmus Jorgensen's stewardship and Husqvarna colours to have won a Grand Prix? Maybe in the last
Ever? Or,
decade?
well, it gets a little
Max
murky.
Anstey, Thomas Covington, Thomas Kier Olsen, Kai de Wolf, Lucas Kuhnen. So he's six, right?
Well, it gets a little murky because, of course, that was the Jackie Martin's team, and then although
But
it,
still, Rasmus was running things.
well, no, he was a trainer.
Okay, I said stewardship, so I
Oh,
guess,
sorry.
maybe he could be bringing them a tray of sandwiches, but then he's still having some influence on
Yes.
on the results.
Rasmus is the greatest team manager in the sport. He does incredible things. And
Okay.
if Rasmus could manage my life, then I wouldn't be on this podcast. I
I
tell you,
think
Adam,
he's busy. He's busy enough.
I'd be on Broadway, or not Broadway. I'd be on the red carpet somewhere. Why would I be on Broadway?
Wait, do you sing? I mean, is there some
Why,
sort of tap
why
dancing
else?
talent we don't know about?
Why on earth would I be on Broadway? And why on earth would Rasmus take me there?
Oh,
um,
just the mental pictures you get. But no, I mean, yeah, I mean, Liam Everts as well in the press conference was, I think he was a bit surprised at the result. And while the conditions could have been a bit scary, I think they were right up his alley because Argentina was just really fast and demanding for a guy who's, hasn't raced since that broken neck. Had to build himself back up. This was slower. This was more technical. It just rewarded like his technique and throttle control. I always kind of feel that Everts is one of those, a bit like we've seen in the past, with his dad, one of those riders that never really looks that quick, but is finding out the smartest and the most effective lines around the track and building his way into a moto. So this was This was a fantastic performance, and I think you have to consider him as a championship favorite. Even though Kai de Wolf, sort of the reigning number one, who briefly lost the red plate, I still find that situation bizarre, where the red plate can change in the middle of a Grand Prix weekend. But then I guess you have to consider that points are points. And Sasha Kunin had the red plate for the motos, but if there was a race scenario where his crazy throttle hand was not suited, then it was definitely the conditions in those two races. And Kai was also very sort of measured and mature to remind everybody that he's the reigning world champion. So props to Liam and to the team for another one too. But then also the Dutchman showing that he has the outlook again to make it happen in 2025.
12 Grand Prix wins in a row for Nissan Husqvarna
Oh
factory
wow.
racing.
That's another stat. Jesus, Lewis.
Well, there's
You
another.
either
Well,
you either need more weekends off or I don't know, buy some IKEA
well,
furniture or something and
um, that wasn't a full stop. That was actually a comma as we move into the other stat,
okay.
which is 22 MX2 22 MX2 GP wins in a row for the Pierre Mobility Group.
Okay.
And you
Further
would bet on it
underlining.
going to 40, wouldn't you?
Well, maybe Honda are getting closer. Maybe they're the ones to finally end the sequence.
No, yeah, that's fair. But all I have to say on Everts is I'm still slightly skeptical, but mostly incredibly impressed that all of the time off in the winter, again, he got back on the bike 2, 3 weeks before round one. I'm incredibly impressed that his conditioning over the course of an entire GP weekend seems to be unaffected. And there's almost a state of disbelief there. It almost doesn't seem real to me. But from what I've seen in the dry and now the mud, he is well equipped and ready to battle for this championship, despite perhaps the worst off season that a rider can have.
Yeah, that is bizarre, isn't it? And the riding that he was doing before Argentina, by all accounts, were on tracks that didn't have big jumps. Was not your typical Grand Prix track. And to some of I mean, Saint Jean this coming weekend could rattle his bones a little bit more because there's some big old downhills, especially if it's dry and sunny. There's some pretty gnarly approaches to be had at that track. But yeah, I agree. I agree. Look out for Liam.
If you had to bet right now, and this, I came up with this question on Saturday, it's less fun now, perhaps, but if you had to bet on either KTM or Husqvarna to win this championship, who are you betting on? Essentially, you're betting on either Everts or De Wolf or Adamo and Lagerfelder and Kunen.
Uh, well, you have to say Husqvarna after going 1-2 at the weekend.
Yeah, it's kind of, and also Lagenfelder is some points behind now. I want to say in the 20 marks. So Husqvarna do have a grip on this thing, but it is shaping up to be another internal Pierre Mobility Group brawl. I think
Yeah.
it's fair to say. Um, but yeah, you started talking about Honda. First MX2 moto win since Vlaanderen in Lockett in 2019. So some time for the manufacturer. First MX2 podium since a similar period. And in fact, this surprised me. And this is another stat. Just a fourth Honda rider to finish on the MX2 podium since 2004 when MX2 was
Since
introduced.
2004. So I'm gonna say obviously Gajser, Fernandez, and who else would it have been? Could it be someone random like Pascal Lorray? No. Who else would have been Honda podium?
Well, so
It's
this
probably
is HRC. HRC, sorry. I think I said Honda. I meant HRC.
but then does Fernandez count?
Well, actually, no, because Geyser wouldn't count either. So I
Yes,
think
he
I've got
would.
my no, because he was Garibaldi on MX2.
Yeah, but that was still HRC by then. That was
Okay,
the first year I think was 2015 when HRC kind of, I mean, Gajser was getting help technically for the bike that year.
okay. I think I've got myself in a bus
Oh,
then.
you failed the
Yeah, I
last
think I've got
stat of the
myself. No,
podcast.
I've got myself
Who
in
are
a
the four
massive
riders
bus.
anyway?
No, because it's wrong. Because Anstey had a Garibaldi podium, Rubini had a podium, Jeff Dement had a podium. Like I don't know what I've done. What was I looking at?
Anstey definitely wasn't riding an HRC bike.
No, but still, if you're talking Honda, so I think I've got myself in a very big confusion.
Yeah, I think HRC MX2 riders is only Gajser and Fernandez. Even when he was
I don't think you
riding
can count
for
Geyser.
Yeah, in
But
2015, I'm pretty
Vandrin,
sure.
obviously. Vandrin was an official HRC rider.
Yes. Okay. Vlanderen as well. But Fernandez, for example, was riding for the Garibaldi team when MX2 was just like a little side project and still didn't have backing from the Japanese. In fact, the reason why he jumped into MXGP to begin with, even though he wasn't 23, because, the bike was just underpowered for him.
Okay, I figured out where I misspoke. I figured out where I went wrong. Just four Honda riders have won an MX2 moto.
Okay, right.
That's I got
So that would be Vlanderen, Gajser. Uh, did Fernandez win one?
no.
Is everybody bored of this by now?
I don't. Yes, it was Hampshire.
With San, okay. Oh, good one. That was at the
Yeah.
WW Ranch. That was when he got a bit cheeky with that outside line from the gate, wasn't it?
Yes, I forgot about that.
The
Um,
the start line had been churned up in true MXGP style to the point, in fact, where a few years ago the other teams were complaining that it was a concession to KTM, and all the torque they would have are the 450s. That's why Max Nagel just seemed to sort of plow a course through it. I think people kind of tend to ignore the fact that Nagel was like half the size of Kenda Diker, so being able to sort of sit on the bike and just thunder away on the thing was obviously an advantage. But yeah, Hampshire had that kind of on the very outside gate. There was like a line where I think people had been walking all the way around the outside of the first turn for some reason, and it was just like beaten down. It was like a supermoto course, so he just like thundered around to the whole shot and took the win.
that was a really good race. I really liked that. But no, congrats to HRC. I think Zanchi being on the podium and also winning a moto, a huge landmark for the team. As I said after round one, I'm not really judging HRC's MX2 program or the riders too harshly because I really feel like this is a slow build for the future.
Yeah.
So for them to achieve that success at round two of 2025, I think it's a testament to the direction of the project.
Question is Honda HRC now the powerhouse team in the paddock
Oh,
because of the setup, the staff, the backing they have direct from the factory? It seems they're the most complete. Whereas before, I think they were being a bit snobby about MX2 and they directed everything to a very sort of concise and effective MX2 operation. Now it seems to be bigger and it's pretty much like everything a Honda HRC should be in MXGP. I think previously you could say, Red Bull KTM kind of like the watermark. I mean, that is, if you make it into that awning, then you're at the peak. But then I think, HRC now, if you go into MXGP and you see the way it is, it's, it really is just like elite.
I was going to agree with you, but then just as I was about to say yes, it dawned on me that if you are an MX2 rider, that is still not the place that you are taking
Yeah.
your talent. So I don't think you can
Yeah, not
say
yet.
it until that's a desirable position. But
Okay.
MXGP wise, staff wise, infrastructure wise, support wise, all of the other categories are ticks. Still, I think that's the golden goose that is needed to complete the overall picture. Um, but it's certainly trending in that direction. It's interesting though, because where does Yamaha fit into that now? I mean, presuming that you're still looking at KTM as being 1A to Honda's 1B.
I mean, if you look at Yamaha, you had Gertz, you had Benestant to a degree, briefly. You had, Renaux, Ben Watson.
Oh,
There was a real kind of little golden period there, and I think the development with the YZ250F, they were the only people that were able to hold a candle to the Austrian bikes, but they seem to have dropped off. I don't know whether that is to do with the riders, or maybe a realignment of investment somewhere else. But I think that's a little bit of a loss for the sport. The Yamaha are not as potent as they used to be, but it could just be one of those weird timing things.
yeah, I don't know if it. I don't know if, in fact, actually, we know the structure of the team has changed and we know that engines have changed. But I wonder if actually Yamaha would listen to this and be like, actually, nothing's changed. We just aren't winning.
Yeah,
Like, is it
I
just an
mean, yeah,
optics situation? I don't know. Um, I wanted to give Adamo some credit because I think he has really opened my eyes through two rounds, and I'm willing, dare I say that of the KTM riders, I would pick him as
yeah.
Husqvarna's likely threat. And for me to put Adamo above Lagenfelder, It's quite a statement for this podcast.
Yeah, I think Adamo's back to the rider that we saw what in 2023.
Yeah.
Just in that he every weekend he's able to have that kind of in between six, seven, 8 out of 10 possibilities, in terms of performance. There doesn't seem to be too much of a weakness there. And he's able to start. He obviously seems a lot more comfortable on the bike this year. Again, that's something we haven't really been able to deduce by not having our sort of boots on the ground, so to speak. But yeah, it's a good call. I think Adamo, out of all of sort of the Red Bull KTM MX2 riders, is the guy that I would place as like the Wolf rival, or possibly even Everts now.
Yeah, which is wild, because Lagenfelder
What
should
about
be it.
just to backtrack, Lewis? What about Kawasaki? Because Valin has also caught the eye. I think obviously Ice One and Antti Peronen taking on the 250s as well in green. That's something you could say. I mean, they don't have the I don't want to say the merit. I guess it's the achievements that Honda have, but Kawasaki could also be like one of these teams where they're kind of the standard in the next couple of years.
I agree that it could trend that direction. I believe that first they need to shed some stigmas, I guess you'd say. And I think that Jonas's success will have a lot to do with that, evil side of the coin. And speaking of Valin, he hurt his wrist, I believe, in the first moto. It sounds like X-rays came back somewhat clear, but he's going to have further examinations this week. But it sounds
Yeah.
as though there isn't major cause for concern. But, and this isn't reality, but if it was, let's say it was a serious injury and he was out for the year, I would argue that he has already done enough to cement my belief in his potential. Because although he has effectively no results on the board due to crashes, bike problems, and whatever, the speed he has shown, the potential that he has shown has certainly opened my eyes, and I think many other people in the paddocks as well.
Yeah, he's deservedly got some acclaim, like you say, but then it's just the beginning of the journey. I mean, it's the same way you have to feel bad for Marc-Antoine Rossi, who's the other sort of Red Bull KTM rider missing in action because he's dislocated his shoulder and needed surgery. Looks like he's going to be missing for half the season. There's incredible technique and also the right mentality there in that young Frenchman, but we won't be able to see it. I just hope Valin's not going to be on the sidelines, or is too badly injured.
I mean, it sounds the tone sounds as though there's no concern. So I would be
Right.
surprised, but you never know. Sometimes stuff does creep up. Look at Tomac, for instance. They said no injury, and then a couple of days
Yeah.
later, it turned out to be quite a serious injury. We should congratulate Yamaha and Beniston on the qualifying race win. Although it doesn't count for much, it certainly is a sign of some sort of uptick for the blue team in MX2 and Beniston, who's on a very difficult path back to the top. Um, Let me ask you this quickly. Someone said to me, when was the last time that Yamaha won an MX2 moto? And I said, well, what do you mean? They didn't win one this weekend. And they said, no, they won qualifying. And I was like, yeah. And I said, yeah, that's not a moto. No, well, no, it counts for
Yeah, it's not a
points now.
moto.
But so there seems to be a wave of people now that qualifying counts for points as counting that as equal to a Moto 1 win. But I don't. Correct?
I
Or
mean, no, it's not a
okay.
moto. It's a heat. I mean, even though it's called a qualifying race.
It goes into the
Yeah.
pole position category.
Yes.
When was the last
Yeah.
time Yamaha had a pole position? That is the appropriate question.
Yeah. That's the sensible definition.
Okay. I'm glad we figured that out. And Beniston, I believe he had to stop in pit lane in the second moto with a damaged front wheel from memory. So that explains the subpar second moto. Anything else?
Quickly, your opinion, very quickly. EMX250. With the removal of the Indonesian Grand Prix and Finland sliding into place, Kimi Ring is back. Uh, that means another date for EMX 250. And again, it's something I tweeted. GateDrop.com had a nice article where they interviewed several EMX 250 team managers about the extra expenditure and the addition of the extra race to the calendar. 13 rounds now for the European Championship. Is that a good thing or not? I still find the lines between EMX 250 and MX2 to be too close, to be too blurry, but then when the cost of EMX 250 starts to get too much or too close to MX2 World Championship consideration, then where's the relevance? And also, I mean, you can't kind of talk anything bad about its merits as a development championship, but maybe there does need to be less scale. Maybe there needs to be some closer correlation to Grand Prix, whereby, say, you have 8 or 9 EMX 250 races and then guaranteed free entry to a certain amount of MX2 based on your performance. Say the top five from EX 250 can consider round 10 of MXGP in a reasonably central European location that wouldn't be of great cost. Then also the organization like Infront could focus on those top five riders and say, is this the new generation coming? Even have a special kind of media spotlight or a separate classification, have a mini championship within a championship, and bring EMX 250 into the MX2 universe in that way. Do something a bit more inventive with it rather than having them as these competing series almost. And we've spoken in the past about how EMX 250 or the European Championships in general have kind of adverse effects on track preparation. There's not enough time maybe for the crew to work on the surface. They sometimes create stranger lines. It's too much, it seems. I don't know. What's your view?
I agree with all that you said. I
But
guess no, I agree fully with all that you said. I guess if I want to offer something additional, I would say it's bizarre to me that you can add an extra round to a championship when I know EMX hadn't started, but effectively the championship had started. That's odd to me that you can just do that. Um, yes, as I've said, and as you just said, EMX 250 and MX2 are far too close and take away from each other. EMX 125, there really is only a need for EMX 125 and MX2 because the best riders can go from a 125 to MX2 and then build from there. Um, it does feel as though maybe Infront have rested on their laurels a little bit with this celebrated structure, whereas maybe, as you said, they could be more inventive, and they innovated in a sense with EMX. Now let's innovate again because that's why we get a new iPhone every year. That's why the world continues to move. So I think that some consideration could be useful on that front. I think there's many ways to go with EMX 250. You could make it a regional competition. You could have, I don't know what you'd call it, but you could have Spain and Portugal combined as a qualifier, then Holland and Belgium and Germany and Czech, and then you have a super final at the end, an EMX 250 super final at the end of the year. So then it really is accessible to these amateur talents that don't have the funds to travel around Europe. EMX 250 teams will go, well, what about us? That isn't enough events. Well, you're an EMX 250 team. Grow up. Get to MX2. You're not important. That's harsh, but it's kind of once again brings us back to this is the FIM Motocross World Championship. An
yes.
EMX 250 team is not the blood of the sport, the blood of the series. It's not like you kind of just fall in line.
I think but you have to treasure something that creates a filter system to bring riders to the World Championship. But in the same token, by the same token, you have to protect what is the MXGP brand. You have to keep it as, I mean, you've made it exclusive anyway, because it's, a significant investment, for the riders in terms of their preparation, physicality, everything, and for the teams in terms of all the costs and the budget. So you have to kind of stick with that. It shouldn't be devalued. Circuits shouldn't be stretched to the absolute breaking point because they're trying to fit in X amount of campers or whatever else. Uh, you know, we're way beyond the point of the European Championship being a separate series, existing independent from MXGP. And the cynical view as well, of course, is that it's a moneymaker. The riders that turn up and they try to qualify and they try to race as part of EMX, bring revenue. They also add value to the GP organizers because there's that many more people coming to that location, spending money in the local supermarkets, in the gas stations, restaurants, whatever. So there are the pros and cons, wherever you look about EMX 250, but how you market it and how you promote it and how you involve it into sort of this, the MXGP ecosystem or whatever kind of bollocksy marketing term you want to use. That's the next point where you should be looking at it. EMX 250 should have even more prestige to be able to win it, and it should not be held anywhere near MX2 or the World Championship in terms of merit. And at the moment, I don't think it's, they're quite sort of similar.
Yeah, I've said this before. don't post about the EMX250 winner on the MXGP Instagram account in the same manner that you do the MX2 winner. Maybe don't give them live coverage of each moto as you do for MX2. That it's one in the same. Tell me where the differences are, other than honestly, tell me where the differences are besides the name. I can't think of one.
Yeah.
Length of race, I guess the EMX250 races are slightly shorter, but it's not like there's more prize money in MX2. It's not like there's more whatever in MX2. Like there isn't.
Yeah.
EMX250 is a poor man's MX2 class. And unfortunately, with the addition of another round, it's not even really the poor man's MX2 class. It's the slightly less wealthier man's MX2 class. Um,
13 rounds. I mean, I think in 2003, the FIM World Championship was 13 rounds.
yeah, 13 is insane. Credit though, in front have not completely done away with, but for the most part gotten rid of the absolutely diabolical and incredibly boring EMX Open and EMX two-stroke classes.
Yes.
So thank God for that. We are now just as far as championships, let's say, we do just have EMX 125 and EMX 250 and WMX, which is closer to how it should be. But yeah, I would like to see more emphasis placed on EMX 125 as the
Yeah.
feeder system and an EMX 250 reduced into some sort of development system where, okay, you've come from 125s and you're not yet ready to go to MX2. Okay, come here.
Yeah.
That should be the
I,
place.
I I also like the fact that, the world's fastest teenager might be living in Finland with very limited financial resources and cannot get over all the way to Spain to compete in EMX 250. So the fact that the series is going there gives him an opportunity to shine. But the truth of the matter is that, even if that talented kid does shine in EMX 250, then he's just going to be swallowed by the fixture list and the congestion and the fact that there's another round happening the following weekend.
Yeah, which is where, although my idea about it becoming a regional qualifier system, which feeds into a super final, it's very rough and I kind of just blurting it out. I'd have to figure it out in more detail. I do like it from that sense of the Finnish kid can, that's his chart. Oh, suddenly it turns the narrative from MXGP add Finland as an EMX 250 round. Look what they're doing to the costs. It turns the narrative to MXGP adds Finland as an EMX 250 round. Look at all these kids in the Scandics that now get their chance to show what they can do in their regional offering.
Very, very quickly, because then we could go on for hours about this. But MotoGP, they have a road to MotoGP system and they have regional kind of cups. I mean, there's a European Talent Cup, there was a Northern Talent Cup, there's a British Talent Cup, Asia Talent Cup. And then, of course, the most high-profile stepping stone is not only Junior GP, but also the Red Bull rookies. If you had sort of the Red Bull MotoGP rookies in motocross, would that work? Whereby I'm talking of, say, 20 riders that have gone through a selection process and they're racing equal machinery, in eight of the rounds, like it is in MotoGP, 7, 8 rounds. And then it's kind of recognized as an elite school or promotional platform for MotoGP. I mean, there's so many of the current riders on the MotoGP grid have come through the Red Bull MotoGP Rookies Cup. Can that not work in MXGP?
I guess the equal machinery is of concern because I don't think we're sophisticated enough for that. But at its core, the rest of it, I think so.
Well,
Um,
Yamaha tried to do something with the Blue Crew
yeah, that's true.
Cup, and then Honda had their
150.
150, yep, series. I mean, why can't Fantic, provide something for this new scheme? And it's, I don't know, and it's kind of run by not a manufacturer, it's run by another entity, whether it's the Monster Energy Promotion Cup or something like that. That would be something where it's given sort of clear distinction. I don't know.
I think
Maybe it
it's
wouldn't
important
work.
to add to this conversation, and maybe we should have talked about it off the top, but a lot of criticism about the lack of riders in MX2 and MXGP in Spain. Um, a, Spanish and Portuguese rounds do tend to have a lower attendance just because they are quite far from Belgium, Germany, especially the Nordics. Um, but also, it really is relevant to this conversation because there were only 20 something MX2 riders, 22, I want to say. 20 started MX2 Moto 2. Well, where were they all? Well, there was 40 in EMX250. So EMX250 is literally eating MX2.
Yeah.
Literally. That's black and white. You can't tell me there's, and then just to clarify, because this will come up from people who aren't up to speed, MX2 and EMX250 now have the same entry fee, €300 each. So that isn't a concern either.
Yeah.
EMX250 is literally eating MX2. That's the headline. That's just story. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it also comes down to the OATs, the officially approved teams. So there is like a compromise or a commitment needed by a team to be an MX2 contender. You can't just roll up and do, say, 15 of the 20 GPs. You know, you have to be in it all the way. So that's maybe a consideration.
I think you can. Can you not? I think you can turn up and do 15 as a privateer, can't you? You just lose benefits like the team report comes as the
Yeah,
OAT
the freight
contracts.
support.
Yeah. Although they've been starting to give that to randomers now as well. Actually, yeah, that's a good.
Awesome.
Maybe we'll look into this. I'm unsure now what the benefit is of being on an OAT team.
Well, I mean, the first port of call would be, say, like Sean Simpson. I mean, we are talking about him in the 2015 podcast the other day, but he ran a ride, he had Josh Gilbert riding MXGP in 2024, and now they're just focusing on the EMX250. We have to say to Sean, what kind of benefits are there? Is there such a big cost benefit for you to focus on 13 European rounds as opposed to 20 MXGP rounds? Is there no way for you to find a sponsor to make up for that shortfall? In the budget required to do, say, the Indonesian double, considering you have those concessions and support from in front to make it that distance. So yeah, it's maybe it's a good editorial to dip into.
Yeah, and the Sean Simpson's team would be a concern here because if you say do away with EMX 250 in this fantasy land, the natural question is, well, what about teams like Sean Simpson's? Well, I would like to see his team continue to get the same MX2 support, or sorry, the same KTM support, but rather than be an EMX 250 team for KTM, be this MX2 team that has the riders, like for instance, Marc-Antoine Rossi is unlikely to get re-signed at the end of this year. Put him in Sean Simpson's team in the lower end of MX2 where he can rebuild and maybe then he's worth pulling out of the talent pool. It can work exactly
Yeah,
the same.
you are now, I think, with like Yamaha doing MXGP and MX2 in-house, like they have done for a couple of years, and Kawasaki doing the same, Honda doing the same. There is room for a second tier of satellite teams where the support comes from the manufacturers and the emphasis is on development, not just on going out and getting fantastic results and appeasing sponsors, if that's possible. Maybe if we're talking about Sean's setup, then why can't he focus on EMX 125 or be like, the specialist EMX 250 8-round series, but then also dedicates themselves to those special 5 rounds of MX2 where they're, helping their rider to understand the next step that's required for their athlete to bounce onto Red Bull KTM, something like that.
With your idea at the start of this conversation about the top five in EMX 250 being given support or whatever for MX2. How about you make EMX 250 run through the first 10 rounds of the series, not consecutively, let's say 5 of those 10 rounds, and then there's a clear cut-off point, let's say after the summer breaks, so come Lockett and Lommel, where EMX is done, and you welcome the winners of EMX 250 into MX2 for the final part of the season with some support, and there's your spotlight, and then you've got an EMX 250 series, which is almost a qualifier for the final part of the MX2 season, where now you graduate and show what you can do. I don't know. There also,
Yeah, I mean,
final point, there has to be some sort of rule where if you finish top five, top 10, podium, whatever you want to define it as, if you're above the threshold in EMX 250 1 year, you can't just come back the next year and give it, and like, you can't finish third in EMX 250 and then decide to come back the next year. I don't think that's
yeah.
counterproductive.
If you have a situation like Bobby Bruce where you tried MX2, an injury pretty much halts your career, can you go back to the MX 250?
I think that's okay because he was
Maybe
never
it should
really
be,
in MX2, you know?
yeah. I mean, there should still be some status for a European championship for you to be able to say you are the champion of Europe. I don't think that's something you should do away with. But then it has to be hyped up enough. It can't just be like you say, someone that gets tweeted out. Maybe there should be just this whole European strand to in-front motor racing where there's almost like a separate mini team responsible for wholesale European orientated promotion. I don't know.
It'd be great to have David Luongo on this podcast where we can just
Dan,
Dan, as he's affectionately known. Imagine him inserted in the screen right now. Just, I mean, I think
you're
he'd be
boiling his brain,
blindsided,
I
to be
think.
honest. I think he
Yeah.
probably would have hung up by now. Right. Any final thoughts?
No, on to France, but then you and I are going to be doing this podcast probably in person.
Yes. So next week, this podcast will certainly be audio, that's for sure. It won't, if it's video, it won't look the same, most likely, because if you're watching, you can see this is set up for remote podcasting. But certainly the audio version will be out and most likely quicker than normal. I'd imagine it'll be Monday. But the video version, TBC, on how it will look and what it will be and all of that fun
Yeah, but
stuff.
people can't be watching this. I mean, they're probably clicking play and then doing something and listening to it. I mean, they don't need to be watching our faces. So even if it's just like a graphic or a still shot or JPEG or something, then that's enough, right?
I don't know. I think people enjoy watching us.
Okay.
I, d- I don't know. I would hope someone out there does. Maybe not. Maybe we'll just stop doing video then, Adam. Maybe that's it. Um,
No, we just have to put up a photo. Well, I mean, the Vital MXGP podcasts are fantastic with the highlights and the scrolling bar and everything, Lewis. It's a very high level.
I also final thought. Previously, I said to you about the word podcast being redundant or the word show being redundant. How about I was talking about doing away with the word show, MXGP podcast. How about just MXGP show? Two four-letter words. So
Hmm.
looks quite nice and quite punchy. And also, I feel like coming up, there probably would be some sort of in front MXGP show. So if we can get the name now, then we could cash in eventually.
Okay. For that motivation alone, then go for it.
Yeah, so I'm still playing around with that for reasons that are unclear. Thank you to Polisport and Prox/ProX for their support of this podcast, the MXGP podcast show, our fourth consecutive week of podcasting, unbelievably. And we will be back next week for week 5 and then probably a week off. But thank you for listening. Thank you to your commitment and support of this podcast. We will see you in 7 days' time to talk about the MXGP of Europe and what looks like another mudder in France. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you real soon.